Hey everybody, what is up? Welcome back to Funnel Trade. I have another great question from a patron. How do you decide when to harvest profit? I had a simple plan of in 10 years, but with recent number goes up of the market, I'm debating if I diversify early. When do you pick the apples? Okay. So this is a good question, and it's a thing that we think about a lot. And the first most disappointing part of the answer to this is there is no objective answer. So just accept that from the start. There is no objective answer to the question of when should I sell? When is the best time to sell? When is the optimal time to sell? Because you cannot predict the future. You cannot know if someone is going to come into the market the day after you sell and they're going to do a giant buyout of the market and the prices will spike and you will have missed out on all the potential profit of having waited just a couple days longer. And so, in general, what I do is I don't really have a good set of criteria for when to sell. When the prices of something that I'm holding start to go up to a high number, and high is ill defined, I will start to slowly sell some. And as the prices go higher, I will sell a little more. And eventually I hit the point where either I sell the last of it or I keep a small amount. And again, small amount is ill defined. It's small amount relative to the kind of quantities that I'm working with nowadays. And so I'll keep a small amount just on the outside chance that something nutty happens with the product in the future. But by then, I'm so far into the profit that it doesn't matter if I just hold those boxes forever and never realize a profit on them. So sometimes that's the reason I sell. Now, sometimes I'll look at a product and I'll say, I just feel like it's run up too much and it probably doesn't have a lot of legs left in it. It doesn't have a lot higher that it could reasonably run in a short enough period of time. But what is reasonably and what is short enough, those are both also ill defined. And so what you might be seeing here is that it's just mostly based on emotion and feelings. And I know that feels awful to say, but when there's no objective answer to the problem, that may be the best thing you have. And it may be okay right now that if you think you're seeing the same kind of very slightly bearish signals starting to develop in the market, and you think maybe the market is going to roll over sometime in the next 6 months, and maybe prices will be set back by quite a bit for a while, maybe you think you should sell a bit right now. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Maybe you think that 10 years is a good timeline, and maybe it is. The thing I worry about on those kind of 10-year timelines is, man, there's so much uncertainty going out 10 years. And so I don't want to just blindly say, hey, I'm going to lock this stuff away in a cardboard box in my basement and I'm going to leave it for 10 years come hell or high water. So I think it's useful to reevaluate things from time to time and not more or less set in stone when you're willing to sell something. Now, I thought about this question for a couple days before I've made this video. And the reason was it's always bothered me that there is no objective answer to the question. And so I thought, can I come up with something that's maybe a little more satisfying than saying, oh, yeah, it's just based on feels and emotions and vibes and, do it when you feel like it. And, hopefully the price doesn't spike right after you sold a bunch and make you feel bad. And I actually thought, how could we measure something and then maybe make some kind of slightly informed decision? And I had the idea that what if we keep a spreadsheet that says, okay, I've got all these, say, collector boxes, I've got all these Pokemon booster boxes, and my average basis price is something, and my average purchase date was some other thing, or maybe you divide it up for each lot that you bought of something. If you buy something multiple times, you list them on your spreadsheet as separate lots. And then say once a quarter would probably be about the right timing. Maybe once a month if you're really hyper about it. Maybe once a month or once a quarter you come through and you say, okay, what's today's current date? And what's today's current market price, or maybe a market price adjusted for the sale costs that you would face depending on how you sell them. And you basically compute what would my compound at annual growth rate for the whole period I've held this product be if I sold them today. And so the reason that I suggest you only do this once a month or once a quarter or something like that is because going out and collecting all those market prices, it takes a little time and the market doesn't move that fast most of the time. And so you might compute that, oh, a bunch of these boxes have a 15 or a 20% CAGR right now. And so off to the side, you would copy that result and you would paste it as a value in the spreadsheet so that it doesn't change later. And you'd put a note on there that these are the values that I computed on September 12th, 2025. And so then when you come back 3 months later and you say, oh, well, now if I sold today on November 12th, 2025, the compound annual growth rate has increased to 22% for the whole period I've held it. And so that might make you decide on when is a good time to sell it. Because you might see, oh, the last time I looked at this, the CAGR over the whole holding period was 15%. And then it just took a heck of a spike in the last quarter. And now it's 22%. And you might say, that feels like a good time to sell. You got very, very richly rewarded for those last marginal 3 months that you held the product and tied up your capital in it. And so it might be a really good time to sell. And you might see something happening where you say, well, the last time I looked at this, the CAGR was 16%. Now it's 14%. Yeah, okay, I'll just go ahead and sell. And maybe it would recover in the future, or maybe it would go down more. But if it was 16% a quarter ago and it's 14% today, maybe you feel like that's a good time to sell. Now, you're still basing those things just on emotion and feel, but at least you made a measurement in there. And you might come up with some rules that you follow. You might say, well, if something ever reaches 25% or greater, I just go ahead and sell it because I'm more than happy with that. Or maybe you would say, I will hold something for a minimum of 3 years after it's out of print. And then as long as the CAGR remains above 20%, I will continue to hold it. And someday off in the future, if the CAGR ever drops below 20%, that's when I'll go ahead and say, it's been a good long run and the gains have been really high. And I'm just going to cut this one short and get rid of it. So at least you could make some objective rules then. And as long as you have the discipline to follow them, you would feel like it was less than just emotion and vibes and feelings controlling when you sell. Now, setting up your rules is emotion and vibe and feel driven. And so you still have that. You don't have some formula that falls out of first principles that tells you, yes, we can definitively prove that here is the optimal time to sell an asset and lock in the profits. But I think something like waiting 2 or 3 years until after a product is out of print, and then saying if it falls below some certain compound annual growth rate percentage after that point, I'll go ahead and sell it. And otherwise, I'll just let it ride longer. Well, think of where that would have put you. You probably would not have sold. Yeah, you definitely would not have sold any of your Sword and Shield era boxes so far because the ones that have been out of print for 2 or 3 years or longer are still performing way better than 20% CAGR. So you would have held on to all of those winners. You probably would have sold out of a number of Magic collector boxes that now are just going on an incredible tear. So you might have missed out on some of those, especially some of those 21 and 22 era products that really took a long time to whittle down the available inventory in the world to the point where the prices are now rapidly rising. So for the most part, maybe that would take care of it and give you a good set of rules. And again, that comes down to, hey, what if you had said, I'm going to hold for 4 years? Well, all those 21 era products, you'd only be doing a first assessment on them this year. And so you would have held the things like Kaldheim that you could have picked up in the 120s and 130s at some points. And now it's at what, 230, 240, 250. So you would have held on to those and you would have made that 50% gain that that product did in 2024. You would have also held it through moving sideways for most of 2025 right so far. So, think about that. Think about maybe there's a holding period, a minimum holding period to which you give the product grace for the supply in the world to tighten up and come down and for the price to rise. And then afterwards, you just become ruthless and you say, if it's not continuing to deliver whatever number you like, 15, 20, 25% CAGR, then you cut it loose, you take the profit you got, and you move on to something else. So, sorry, there's no objective answer. There's only less bad answers amongst things you can do, and trying to separate when you do the emotional, vibe driven thing of setting rules and separate that in time from when you actually sell. That's probably the best thing you could do. So that you're not just sitting there saying, well, Wilds of Eldraine looks really good to sell at $500. And then in the 2 months since then, it's doubled to 1,000 and it's gone to 1,100 now. Because even today, if you make the emotion driven decision to sell Wilds of Eldraine collectors at $1,100 and you're feeling pretty good about it and you're looking really smart, I don't know, by the end of the year, maybe it's a $2,000 box. And in the next 3 months, you missed out on doubling your money again. Who knows? You can't know. So you could at least try to say, well, I made a set of rules in the past. I evaluated them critically when I was a long way away from actually having to make a decision on selling that would affect my money. And then later, when it came time to enforce those rules, I enforced them unemotionally. And so you can probably feel good about that at least. So let me know what you think. Thanks to everybody who makes this content possible, especially my very generous supporters on Patreon who ask great questions like this and get actual answers for them. Like, comment, share, and subscribe, and join me on Final Trade. Buy a hat.